But this is a topic that's actually very close to my heart, and I think it's a very important one. And I'm going to go there straight out of the gate. But when I was growing up, unfortunately, my father, who was a business owner, had a workplace accident, and on the back of that didn't have appropriate emergency funds, let's say, in place. And then when his accident occurred and he couldn't go back to work, he was in a very challenging circumstance, and it put an immense amount of financial stress on my home. Now, after experiencing something like that personally, my view on emergency funds is very, very different than someone that's never had financially harder times. Now, I see this pretty apparently today that if a business owner's never experienced it, they do not set up appropriate buffers, or they don't have appropriate emergency funds, and they really don't even have a context to think about it because they've got no pain association. Yep. Where for me, I'm like, I will say this is something where, and I think you've even mentioned this to me, is you've said you're overly conservative in a lot of ways.
Very much so.
Yeah, well, this is where it comes from. This is something where it's like, for me, after having that experience, is that I require, and it is a requirement, I'm using very specific language here, a certain amount of emergency fund to be prepared to weather any potential storms. Now, I'll go further than this though, because like in the case of what happened to my father, that was very unusual, right? That's not time specific in any way. Like I realize all of us could walk out our door today and, I hope not, but get hit by a bus.
Yep.
So there are those types of things you need to be prepared for. But I'll go even further. If you look back in the last 100 years, just in the world economies or so, like they've always gone through cycles. Mm-hmm. There's always peaks and troughs and bulls and bears, and like the market moving and changing is a part of it. And don't quote me on these exact dates, but it's like if you look to like every 7 to 10 years roughly, there's some sort of big economic change. So it was like GFC, we've just had one, and then it was like the dot-com boom, yep. Right? So there's a few of them that go back there. So as business owners, like I look at that and go, we know this happens. We know it isn't a if, it's a when.
Yeah.
So knowing that, let's just plan for it. Let's get it out of the way. Let's be prepared so when those times come, this isn't something where we get potentially wiped out, which has massive consequences, especially in Australia. So like bankruptcy in Australia is way more serious than the US. Yep. But then the other side of it is like it also presents opportunities to thrive. Like it might actually be the best version of your business if you're set up to weather those types of storms. And I just would say, I'll go as far to say this as well. Every good business owner I know, every one of them has measures in place to weather storms. They really do. I'm yet to find one that I would consider really savvy and well planned that didn't.
Do you think that's because they've had to weather a storm before? Because it's like for younger business owners, right? The people that might have been doing business for 5 years, maybe 10 years, right? Just sort of pre-COVID kind of thing, which actually was really good for a lot of organizations where they haven't seen that pain. Their family might not have gone through something like you've been through. Do you think this is more of I've seen the pain of when that happens, so now I've just got the cuts on my back to understand, hey, I need some emergency funds? Or does this come from like another place of them just going, I'm now completely aware of these peaks and troughs, and sometime is going to be a trough, and I'm acutely aware to that, and I just need to put something away?
I would say that in my experience from what I've seen is that dealing with challenge and hardship is a skill.
Yep.
You would see that people that have experience doing that weather them much easier, where someone like who's never gone through a downturn or never seen economic situations changed is they're noticeably more stressed. And I'll give an example to articulate it. If you're driving your car to a place you've never been before, do you ever notice like how assertive you are to like, oh, did I just miss the street?
Yeah.
Oh, what's the speed limit? Oh, do I need to be in this lane? Versus like if you're going to a place you've been to hundreds of times, maybe a parent's house, it's like you just all driving home from business or work, you can almost forget the drive. You're on autopilot.
Yep.
I would say it's the same here. I would say business owners that aren't adequately prepared to deal with challenge, hardship, economic change, they feel it. But that's part of the process of like, everyone had to drive that road the first time. So it's part of building your full stack of skills, shameless plug, of like being a good business owner. Like I don't know a business owner you can't be a business owner that's only successful in the good times.
Yeah.
It sounds like a pretty shitty recipe for success, right? You need to be able to thrive in both environments. You need to have skills to support being a good business owner in the boom and the bust,
Yep.
in the ups and the downs.
And not necessarily just because of the market going boom and bust. Like I even had a very good friend of mine who bought quite a few properties. He leveraged himself up, and then his business actually had a bit of a downturn. And it was just not market related. It was just they just didn't generate as many leads and sales. And they actually went and sold some of their investments at a fire sale, which is like, I'm talking like blocks of land at 50% off, just to go and inject that cash back in their business. And there was no marketing forces there. It was just unexpected things that happened in the business, like people leaving, etc. And they're just like, wow, I wish I had some kind of emergency fund to support me through this, not just waiting for like a big sort of economic impact. But it's interesting. When you look at an emergency fund, so yep, economic impact can come through and you can have some sort of businessy thing. Is it the concept of an emergency fund just to get you over like a month of operation, just until I'm back on my feet? Like, hey, if I lose a couple of big clients, do I just need enough money to get me back on my feet? Or is this more of a, okay, no, you need to think about this completely differently, as opposed to, I back myself, Charlie. I can sell things, I can market things. I know I can make money. I just need enough money to support me until I go and make it. Or is there another concept or another approach that you think that we should be thinking about this in?
I view it in two ways. I think there's an emotional side to it. Like, what do you need to sleep at night? And then I think there's a logical side to it, is like, what does the maths tell us versus like the skill sets and networks and all the things we have? And I've certainly looked at both of these pretty heavily here. And I would almost say there's like another layer, but I'll bring this up later where I want to talk about something else that's attached to this. Is like logically, I spent some time and looked at like, okay, if there is a big recession, how long do they normally last? Like, what's the average? And just for anyone out there, is 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to make no money in that 2 years.
Yep.
But the idea being that if economic downturn comes, is on average, that's the span of a recovery. So yep. I would look at that and go, well, as a business owner, if I know that's the average, what needs to be in place so I can make it through a 2-year span? So that's the logical argument. The emotional one, though, is that if you look at it and go, well, if, again, it's like I look at my bank account, it's like how much needs to be in that bank account for me to feel safe?
Yep.
Well, that doesn't factor in how long a recession is at all. That's a much more personalized approach. And I would encourage, like I did, people to acknowledge both. Like in this case here, I know you're way more aggressive than I am with buffers and emergency funds.
Yep.
And you operate at a level that's fine. Like, you're not losing sleep at night because of how much is in your bank account. And if we swapped bank accounts, I probably wouldn't sleep.
Yeah. So
that's where I look at it and go, like, you have to acknowledge these multiple layers. The other side of it is partners. So, like, for example, is like, if you, let's say your partner is very risk adverse and conservative, maybe she needs to see more money in a bank account to feel safe and secure versus you. So you might have to have some extra in there so that your home environment is stable. Because the last thing you would want is, let's say, recession comes and you're coming into your home every night and then your partner's panicked about money and that's becoming infectious on you. So there's an extra layer towards that.
Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all and you want to dive deeper into being a full stack business owner, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.